Hello, and welcome to our video notes. Today, we'll be talking about the chapter 19 called A New South between 1877 and 1900. So some of the things we'll be talking about are the newness of the New South, the Southern agrarian revolt, women in the New South, and the settling of the race issue. So our thesis is the South was able to transform from an agricultural society to an industrialized and urbanized region. Socially, women's reform progressed slower in the South than in the North. And finally, racism did not get any better as the blacks were still isolated socially and politically from society.
The newness of the New South. The South began doing what the North was doing in 1877 to the 1900 on a smaller scale, building railroads and factories. These were all in an effort to rebuild the Southern economy without slaves. Southern railroad industry boomed, and this led to an increase in economic growth and settlement in the South. On a more political note, the Democratic Party dominated Southern politics after 1877 and was able to remove most black and a few white people from the electoral process, thus decreasing people to challenge their leadership. This created an era of white democratic South that lasted into the 1950s. This is also known as the Solid South. The Southern industrial system had some flaws. Business owners found that they can get away with paying their laborers super low wages. This concept is known as cheap labor. However, because the laborers were poorly paid, it actually had negative effects on the economy. Lowly paid laborers equated for lower supply and consumer rates in the South.
Cotton was and has been the most dominant crop grown in the United States, especially in the southern region. Following it was rice and tobacco. Rice and tobacco was able to generate profit post-Civil War, but cotton created a problem. As cotton price fell, many small landowning farmers fell into debt. More and more white farmers became tenants or sharecroppers. Railroads helped many states diversify the economy. States such as Georgia grew beaches while Texas started many cattle industries. Yet cotton was still the easiest to grow as it could grow in many soil types and require less machinery. Many southern farmers tried to lower interest rates, ease debt, and keep prices of necessity low. The government weren't interested in supporting these goals because the Democrats represented large landowners and merchants. Many farmers joined an organization called Grange, yet many of the leaders were large landowners who didn't want to benefit the small farmers. After the Grange failed, many new organizations arose, such as the Agricultural Wheel and the Southern Farmers Alliance. The Southern Farmers Alliance topped at over 1 million members by 1890 and was incorporated deeply within religion. The Populist Party also originated from the alliance. The Populist Party supported direct election of senates, income tax, women's rights, and government ownership in railroad. They ended in 1896 as they intertwined with the Democratic Party for that year's presidential election.
Women in the New South. In the 1880s, growing groups of women, both white and black, began to have their voice heard in the public realm and in the political arena. In the North especially, women became more and more active in reforms such as women's suffrage, labor legislation, social welfare, and city planning. Women became more reliant on themselves after the war, since most lost husbands, sons, and brothers. This new independence found by women opened their horizon to take part in movements such as antebellum reform and temperance reform. Women began to find more opportunities in stores and schools and began to form more organizations. One of the most known organizations formed by the women was the WCTU, or the Women's Christian Temperance Union. This union was sparked by religious backgrounds with also the eagerness for temperance in the household. Yet, the women of the WCTU knew that if they wanted to change more in society and reform it, they must first be able to vote. You see, at this time, women wanted so eagerly to see change and improvement that they would not rest until so. The middle-class women then moved to a broader spectrum of reform in the shape of clubs. Clubs were started for literary and self-improvements, yet clubs soon rose to deal with higher matters such as school reform and political issues. In the issue of exploited labor, which many women felt strong about, they used the tactics of boycotting goods in order to have their voice heard.
So continuing on the video, we're going to talk about the settling of the race issue. So in this, we're going to be talking about blacks fighting for what little rights they had and trying to have a more say in the government and in society. So let's first hit on the fluidity of the Southern race relationships between the whites and the blacks between 1877 and 1890. And in many ways, the white population was way more accepting of the blacks than in the past. Schools, churches, and some public places, however, were still segregated. That being said, it was still getting better. T. McCann Stewart, a black journalist from New York visiting the South, said, and I quote, "Whites of the South are less afraid to have contact with colored people than the whites of the North." So whites and blacks at this time were consistently doing business and participating in the government through the Republican Party together. This shows the relationship that they were having, even in the place where slavery was brutally enforced. So there were still barriers, and this black generation that was growing up at this time demanded full participation in the government as they saw themselves as becoming more and more respected in society. However, that being said, the young white generation that was growing up at the same time as these people were beginning to replace the hate for the Northern Yankees with the blacks. This generation saw as their mission, their task, to preserve white supremacy in the South. So this is where you can start seeing the beginning of lynching and publicly killing blacks as a way of enforcing white supremacy and embarrassing them so that they wouldn't want to have anything to do with the whites in their society and in their government. And that partially worked. Shortly following the lynching, the laws, white lawmakers began to take another route to segregate blacks from society. These were formerly known as the Jim Crow laws. Some of these segregational laws, which that's what the Jim Crow laws were pretty much, included not allowing blacks to go into public conveniences such as theaters, hotels, restaurants, and schools. So with these Jim Crow laws in place, blacks became less involved in the skilled workforce and began falling back into the agricultural and field work in society. So you can call this disenfranchisement, as the blacks were becoming less and less involved in the political aspect of the country. So following economic and social segregation from society, whites began aiming for blacks' political rights, including the right to vote and hold office, government office, the white elites began enforcing policies such as the literacy tests and that you had to have a formal education to vote. However, with this being enforced, there were many white people in this area who didn't have a formal education and even who couldn't read. So they found another loophole and they created the grandfather clause, which means that anyone could vote if their grandfather could vote, which was significant because many blacks at this time who were trying to vote grew up, or their grandfathers grew up being slaves and who could not vote. So not only were these restrictions primarily focusing on the blacks, they're also their goal was also to eliminate other parties besides the Democrats, so that the party members of these political parties could not vote. Therefore, the Democrats being the most powerful political party in the South. Also at this time, the North began to believe in a scientific racism. That means that they saw, or they believed that whites were biologically superior to blacks. That it was scientifically proven that they were superior to the black society. And so even with all of these, the Jim Crow laws and the lynchings, blacks continued to fight back. They boycotted and they stopped working in the South, and to show them that they played a big part in society. However, this did not work, unfortunately, because they just didn't have that big of a role in society at this time. So, also, a black middle class begins to emerge, where this class had an interweb of churches, businesses, and facilities that they all attended, and pretty much replaced it with the things that they had when there weren't these segregation laws. So with these, the National Association of Colored Women was created, which provided a place for poor black women and men to provide an education and housing situations. So this played a big role in society as it provided hope and reason to give blacks a chance in society to get better jobs and to have a better life. Also, the creators of the National Association of Colored Women played a big role in speaking for their race, for the African race, as they began being the face of what they believed in. So in 1910, another association was created, was called the Advancement of Colored People, this National Association of the Advancement of Colored People. And their purpose was to restore political and social rights in society. However, the National Society of Advancement of Colored People failed because whites were just too powerful at this time and had way too many advantages over the blacks, who did not have any chance of gaining more political and social rights. So all of these were reasons why millions of blacks left the South to the North, as they saw more social and political equality